So this week, we're going to be learning more about looping. We're going to learn about the while loop. We're going to learn a little bit more about the increment and decrement operators, and you're also going to learn about static methods and how to create your own. In addition, I threw in retrieving random numbers because when we are working with programming examples, it is kind of handy to generate random numbers. So we're going to start with the while loop, and it is similar to the for loop. The primary difference is that the counter is not initialized inside the parameters, and it's not incremented inside the parameters. The only thing that we have is the test condition. So we still may use counter controlled repetition here, but we just have to initialize the counter above the loop and then adjust that counter at the bottom. You can also use the while loop for a user controlled looping, where the user actually inputs something to make the condition test negative, so you can fall out of the loop. So I do have some examples. And this first one would be if the user was entering something that would eventually test false. So they've got a variable that we're reading in, and we're testing it. And then we've got, as long as it's true, we're going to stay in the loop. And you'll notice at the bottom, we're reading in that variable again. So that allows the user then to control whether we stay in the loop or out of the loop. You can also use a counter. And so here we're initializing the counter. We're checking it to see if it's less than a value, and we increment it at the bottom. So it's always helpful if you can see examples. So this first programming example, the user has the option of entering a -1 to end the loop. So we're telling them to enter an integer or -1 to end. We are reading that in. And as long as they do not enter -1, we're going to stay in the loop. So in this kind of loop, it's really, really important at the bottom of the loop that you prompt them, again, enter an integer -1 to end, and that you read it in. Okay, that way, eventually it will test, false, and we'll be able to pop out of the loop. If you forget to prompt them and enter the data at the bottom, you can get into an infinite loop. So what does this loop do? So we're saying stay in it as long as they don't enter a -1. So we've got one number that they've entered. We're asking them to enter another one. And then we're simply asking them, what is the first number plus the second number? We're reading in their answer. And then we're being kind of mean. We're sticking them into a while loop until they answer correctly. So while the answer does not equal the result of the addition, which is the correct answer, we're displaying that's incorrect, try again, and we're reading in their answer. So the only way they're going to get out of this loop is if they put in the right answer. So by the time they get down here, that means, hey, they did it right. So we're going to give them a little positive feedback. And then we're asking them, give us another number or a -1 to end. Okay, and when they do finally enter a -1, we're out of the loop and we just put a little message, thanks for playing. Okay, so that is how the program works. All of these programs in the key points here, you can simply copy and you can actually paste and you can run them. So I've got kind of a little testing one here that's generic, so I can just copy and paste right in here. Enter an integer, -1 to end. So it's conceivable that if I didn't want to do this, I could just put a -1 in right now, but I'm going to go ahead and do it. Enter another integer, and let's do it wrong so you can see it looping. So it will just stay in this loop forever until I enter the correct number. And then I'm back at the top of the loop, well, actually this prompt is coming from the bottom, right? So I'm right down here at this point, and I'm going to go ahead and we'll do it again. So now I'm at the top and I'm at this point, enter another integer. And now I'm going to do a -1. Okay, so that's just an example of the user controlling the condition that we're testing. So I have a similar example, but this is a counter controlled. So you can see I've got my counter I'm initializing up here. I'm going to do this 5 times, and I'm incrementing the counter down here by adding 1 to it. But the program basically does the same thing as the other one. I'm entering an integer or telling them to enter an integer. I'm reading it in, asking them for another one, reading that one in, asking them, what is number 1 plus number 2, reading in their answer. I've got the mean little while loop that they have to stay in until they give me the correct answer. And then I give them a little positive feedback. Okay, and I'm incrementing the counter at the bottom, which is critical. Otherwise, this is never going to test false. Okay, so when I do get to the 6th time, it's going to fall out of the loop. So here is another example. And this one, let's see. This is actually allowing them to use the keyboard. They can press any key to continue or N to quit. Okay, so this is a little bit different. Because we're using the N to signal that we're done, we're going to use console.read to read in 1 character. Then we use the read line to get rid of the new line that's in the queue. And we declare some variables. And then we have to use the convert to character so that we can check to make sure it's not equal to an N. Okay, and then as long as they didn't want to quit, we're telling them to enter the 2 digits. And we're reading them in, calculating the result. We're prompting them, reading in their answer. And as long as their answer is not equal to the sum, we display the message that's incorrect, prompt them again, and read in their answer. So again, another little mean while loop. And then down here, we basically copied this section because we have to prompt them again and read it in because this has to eventually test false so that we can fall out of the loop. So we can go ahead, copy. I was going to copy and paste just that one. Here we go. Okay, so here's just that one. Okay, do you want to continue? And for no, any key for yes. So honestly, any key means any key. I can press enter, I can do a letter, whatever. Okay, so enter 2 digits that you want to add together. Do 5 and 6. Right, so now if I do an N, it's done. So I thought it would be nice for you guys to know how to use random numbers. And pretty much all programming languages have a random number class, and so does C Sharp. And the random number class actually lets you pull in different types of random numbers, but we're just going to start with integers. So we're going to kind of keep it simple. The first thing you have to do to use this class is to declare a class object. So basically declaring a class object kind of works the same no matter what kind of class you're using. It's the class name, and then you're going to have an object that you're giving a name to. Set that equal to new, and then it's the class name with the parentheses. So for a random number, the class name is random. And the object, I'm doing like a little shortened version of the word rand, equals new random. Okay, so at this point, I have created a class object. That is rand. Then I have to use that class object to call the next method. And the next method is the method that retrieves the random number. So the syntax for this is you take your object variable, which in my case it's rand, dot, and then next is the method. And if you don't have to pass it any arguments, but if you do, if you only pass one number, it will be the maximum number that it returns. If you pass two numbers, you're giving it a range. So you're going to get a random number between the minimum and the maximum. Otherwise, if it's just one number, it's between 0 and the maximum. And I should say that if you don't pass it a minimum and a maximum, you're going to get a number between 0 and this very large number. So probably not, numbers that large are not going to work real well with arithmetic if you want people to be doing it in their head. So um, anyway, so here is a little example. And this actually, I am not specifying a min and a max. So you can see the output here is got some very large numbers. And you can see it's retrieving the random number right to the console.write line. Now, what if I wanted to limit? So if I did something like this, rand.next with 10, I would get random numbers between 0 and 10. If I do this, I get random numbers between 0 and 100. And so I've got a little program here. I want to retrieve numbers between 0 and 50. So this is kind of a little rewrite of the program that we just saw. The difference is that the user does not have to enter two numbers. I'm randomly retrieving them. Okay, and so that makes it a little bit more challenging, right? Because if the user's entering numbers, they're maybe entering numbers that they know the answer to. So here, I've got my random. All right, so do you want to continue? I'm just going to press enter. All right, so 74. Okay, so we'll press enter. And let's put the wrong thing in. All right, we'll do another wrong. So as long as we don't do the right answer, we're going to be in this little error while loop. So what is that, 70? All right, so I'm going to go ahead and stop. Okay, but you can see that that was a little bit more challenging because it is retrieving the numbers randomly. Now, we get into converting for loops to while loops and while loops to for loops. Um, you can use either type of loop. So it's really not difficult to do these conversions. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this. All right, so we'll just run it, make sure it works. Okay, 450. So if we want to convert this to a while loop, the while loop only has the condition. Okay, that's the only thing that it can have. So that means we need to declare and initialize this counter. We'll do that right above the loop. And then we're going to increment the counter at the bottom of the loop. And it's not liking this because I haven't changed it to the word while yet. Oops, and it's not going to like that either. Okay, so now that I've changed it to the word while, I have now converted the for loop to a while loop, and the result should be the same, 450. Okay, so really all it requires is taking the counter, pulling it out and putting it above the loop, and then where you're incrementing the counter, you pull that out and put it at the bottom of the loop. And then what if we want to do the opposite, right? So here we've got this lovely little countdown program. And we're using a while loop. So we'll just run it so you can see that it works. Okay. Now we want to convert this to a for loop. So how do we do that? Well, I'm going to change while to for. Okay, and then here is the counter. Okay, so I'm going to create it here with int. And then I've got to change this up here to a semicolon. So now I've got my counter declared and initialized. Here is where I'm changing the value. So I got to put that up inside my for loop here. I'm going to put a semicolon, get rid of that one. And now I have converted it. So let's run it. And it should look exactly the same. That gives me to pre and post incrementing and decrementing. So what I normally do is I use postfix incrementing. That is my go-to. I use it all the time. And if I was going to use decrementing, I'd probably use the postfix decrementing. But there is a difference in when it changes the value. And so that's where these little examples, I think if you run them, that the point kind of hits home. So here we've got a variable called A and B, and you can see A, we've got the prefix incrementing, and B, we've got the postfix. So what happens with the prefix is it does change the value, and then it uses the new value. With the postfix, it's going to use the old value here. Okay. After that, after this point, it would have changed it. But this is where it's happening, so it does not change the value yet. And here it does. So let's test this. And you can see that's exactly what happened. So this is the pre-fix, so it does change it. It added 1 to it and it used the new value. And with B, it did not. So that new value for B would take effect down here on this line. Okay, but it's not going to take place here because that is, where it is trying to increase it, and we specified the post on that one. And decrementing kind of works the same way. You've got pre and you've got post. So pre means, and the only difference here is that it's subtracting, right? So the pre means that it's going to subtract 1 and it's going to use the value 19 here. And post means that it's going to use the 20 and it would not change it to 19 until the next line. And that brings me to static methods. So we actually have been using static methods throughout the semester. Council is a class and it is part of the system namespace. And we have been using council.writeLine and council.readLine all semester. They are methods in the council class. They happen to be static methods. Okay, so or council is a static class. For us to use those methods, we have to use the class name, a dot, and the method name. Okay, and then in parentheses, we send it the arguments. Okay, so if you want to create your own static methods, you can. This is the syntax for a method. Okay, there's an access modifier, and ours is going to be static, but later on, you will learn other access modifiers. For the method, it affects how other classes can access the data. Okay, so it may be hidden from other classes. They may have access to it. There's several different access specifiers that we will be learning about. For right now, we're going to be using static. Then there is the return type. So in your method, you're going to, usually it's the last statement. It says return, followed by nothing or a variable. Whatever data type the variable is, that is what you need to put here for return type. And if you're not returning anything, then you put the word void for the return type. The method name usually is something descriptive. It is case sensitive and it has to be unique. And then in parentheses, you have the parameters that you are passing the method. And in the parameter list, you have to specify the data type and you have to give it a name. Okay, so I have some examples, really simple little static methods. This first one, access modifier static, return type is an integer, and that is because in our parameters, we are passing an integer and then we're just multiplying it 3 times. So that is going to result in an integer. So that is our return type. And then the name of the method is CubeMe. This next one, it is a static method. You'll notice that on the return statement, it is not returning anything. Okay, so The return data type is void. The method name is full name. And you can see that we've got two strings. The variable name for the first one is first. The variable name for the second string is last. And then you can see we're just writing out the first and last name, basically. This next example, again, it's a static method. It's going to return a character. Okay, and if you look at the parameters, we are passing it a string and we're calling it phrase. So you can see it's returning one letter. Okay, we're subscripting into phrase and we're picking the first letter. Okay, so that is a single character. So they match up. Return data type is matching what we are returning. Okay, and then the name of this method is first letter. So in this next example, what is the access specifier? What is the return data type? What's the method name? What's the parameter list? If you click on the arrow, you can find out. So I'm going to let you guys do that. Okay, you can answer it. I have a couple of longer programs for you to look at, just so you can kind of get used to working with these static methods. In this particular program, there's 3 static methods that are called from main: find max, find min, and cube. Okay, so if we look here, here's main. And then right below main, I have find max. So right away, I can see that it's not returning anything. It's called find max, and it's receiving from the main program 2 integers. And so then it's just checking the first to see if it's bigger than the second. And if it is, it says it's larger. Checks the second to see if it's bigger than the first. And if it is, it prints out a little message. And then if it's neither of those, then they are equal. And then we've got find min, which is very similar, right? It's not returning anything. And we're receiving 2 different integers. And we're just figuring out which one is smaller. And if neither one are smaller, that means they're equal. And then the last static method is called cube. And we are receiving an integer, which we are multiplying 3 times. And that is what we are returning. So it's going to be returning an integer. And the name is cube. So we've got our methods. And then if we look in the program, this is a while loop that is allowing the user to determine how long to stay in the loop. They're going to enter a -1 to end. Okay, and so we enter an integer. They're going to enter a second one here. And then we pass those 2 numbers to find max. We pass the 2 numbers to find min. Because they're not returning anything, there is no assignment statement here. We just call the method and the method handles everything. Okay, then we're calling cubed or cube. Cube does return a value. So here's the call to cube and we're passing it number 1. It is going to return that number cubed. And so what are we going to do with that number that gets returned? Well, in this case, we're storing it in result 1. Okay, and then on the next line, we're printing out result 1. Now for number 2, we're handling it a little different. For number 2, the call to cube is right in the right line. So it's still going to pass the number. It's going to cube it and it's going to return the result right here. And because this is part of a write line, it's going to print the result right here. Okay, so we're not storing it in a variable. We are returning it to print it. So we're printing it directly. Okay, and then the next line you can see we're prompting to see if they want to continue or not. We're reading it in. And again, if I wanted to copy this and run it, I can. The last program here, you are going to do something very similar in the assignment. And this last program has 3 static methods. There is a menu, there is a multiply, and there is a divide. So let's take a closer look here. So we basically kind of introduce or say, hello, I'm here to help you with math. And then we're calling the math menu. So let's go down here to the math menu. It is returning character. Okay, and so there's nothing being passed to math menu. Okay, math menu is going to do its magic and return a character. So we're saying, please make a selection from our menu, 1 for multiplication, 2 for division, 3 to quit. We're reading in their choice. We are removing the new line. And then you see what we're doing here. We're converting their choice to character and we are returning it. Okay, because remember console.read, it returns kind of an integer. And then in order to see what they actually typed, you have to convert it to character. So anyway, we're returning that character up here. And we're going to store it in input. Okay, and then we're declaring a couple of variables. We've got our random object, class object that we've declared, and then we get into our little loop. So as long as they did not type a 3, we are going to stay in this loop. And you can see we're grabbing a random number, and the range is 10 to 20. And for our second number, we are grabbing a random number with a range of 1 to 10. Then we're checking to see if they selected a 1. If they did, we are calling multiply and we're passing it the 2 numbers. If they didn't do a 1, then we know that they chose a 2 and we're calling divide and we're passing the 2 numbers. Okay, so multiply and divide. You can already tell just by the calls that they are not retrieving or returning anything. Okay, we're sending it 2 numbers, but it's not returning anything because there is no assignment statement. So coming down here, we're passing in number 1 and number 2. It is calculating the correct answer. It is prompting the user, and we're reading in their answer. Another mean while loop is as long as they don't answer right, we're keeping them in here and we're asking them to, what is the correct answer. So once they answer correctly, we pop out of that little loop and we can say, great answer. Okay. And it's not returning anything. So we go up to where it was called. And then we go down to the next statement where it is going through the math menu and retrieving their choice and storing it in input. Divide is similar. If they enter a 2 and we go down to divide, you'll see that it is bringing in the 2 numbers, calculating the correct answer, prompting the user, reading in their input, and as long as the answer is incorrect, we stay in the loop. Okay, once they give us the right answer, we give them some positive feedback and we go back to the point that that function or that method was called. Okay, and then here is some sample output. So hopefully that helps you understand all of the material for this week better. If there's anything you don't understand, please ask because I am here to help you.